Thank you for joining tonight's event. Sorry, there's a lot of you tonight. And Monique Gore, who's also going to be joining us, who's going to be hosting tonight. She's the director of the Office of Multicultural Engagement. She'll be joining us a little bit later. But for the start of the event, I'm going to read a letter from an alumni to Janet Riggs, the former president of the college. And then I'll let the speakers for the panel introduce themselves. And then anyone can ask questions after that if we have time. Okay, so the letter is to President Riggs, Janet Riggs. It says, "Dear Janet, before April closes, I want to tell you about a Gettysburg alum named Myra Taylor, class of 1967. This would be her 50th reunion, and she died on April 14th. And this letter is dated April 26, 2017. The enclosed obituary appeared in the Washington Post. As a member of class of 1966, I came to the campus weeks in advance of our 50th reunion to search the archives and refresh my memories regarding some programs I had been a part of while on campus as a student. In particular, I wanted to see what might be there regarding Myra Taylor and sororities. Sadly, nothing existed, but notes regarding that sorority's efforts to come back on campus. I'm sharing this because the incidences regarding my path and Myra's haunt me to this day, and perhaps you do not know that history. My mother was disappointed that I had little interest in joining a sorority, so I reluctantly pledged in the fall of my sophomore year. My roommate and I joined together. I believe it was the next year that another sorority sister wished to pledge, Myra. We all voted to accept her. However, our national sorority communicated that they could not approve this request. After many phone conversations, a national representative came on campus and tried to convince us that our sorority, founded in the South, could not pledge someone who would not be accepted on every campus. She was very careful not to give the obvious reason. Ultimately, our chapter was unable to pledge Myra, but we did dissent. When the college, with the agreement of the PanHellanic Council and Interfraternity Council, demanded that all fraternities and sororities sign a non-discriminatory statement, and our national refused, our chapter accepted that we could not pledge, and ultimately we dissolved rather than go off campus. Students at Dickinson College helped us through this since they had faced similar issues earlier. Though there was heartbreak for some in our group because of good memories, my friends did not think twice about disbanding the sorority rather than continue a practice based on such a ludicrous argument. Interestingly, when I contacted the classmate who proposed Myra's membership about coming to our 50th class reunion last year, we had a long conversation and she had no idea of the ripple effect of that event. As soon as Myra was refused membership, she resigned the sorority and went about her college life, which was quite rich without Greek life. I never had any contact information for Myra, so I do not know how this affected her. I suppose having read this obituary, however, has brought some closure for me, but I wish I had known her more. Myra had so much talent and obviously brought much honor to Gettysburg College during her lifetime. It is unfortunate that her life was cut short. Thanks for listening. Marilyn Dietrich Gorman, class of 66. So at this time, I would like the panelists, if they could take turns unmuting themselves and telling us who you are, what class you are, and a little bit about your experience here at Gettysburg. And it doesn't matter who goes first. So I don't know if Justin or Savoy.
I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Savoy Drummond, class of 2020 at Gettysburg, majored in economics and minored in business. I was a part of SAE on campus and also worked at the campus rec center with Cindy Wright and was a part of the GLC with Andy Hughes. And I was also on the track and field team for 4 years, running in the sprint events.
Hi everyone, I'm Andeulazia. I'm class of 2018. I was actually one of the founding members of AOPI. So I was AOPI, the first treasurer, and then I went on to be PanHellanic president my senior year. I was involved, I was a Spanish and Latin American Studies major, and I was involved in too much. Center for Public Service, I did Black Student Union, and then of course I had school, so.
So I guess I'll go next. My name is Tzadik Womack, or Justin Womack is what I was known as in college. So far, I guess I'm the old man here, class of 2007. I was a Lambda Chi Alpha, so I was in Lambda Chi when I was on campus. On campus, I was involved in the Taekwondo club. I guess my first year, I did a little bit of student radio, a tiny bit. Obviously, I was on campus for my studies. I was a philosophy major, so graduated with my BA in philosophy and went on to many good things afterwards.
Great. Is there anybody else that I'm missing? I don't think so. At this point, we may have some other panelists joining us as the evening goes on. So my first question for the three of you at this point, what organization, which you did say, which Greek organization on campus did you join and why?
I guess I'll go first. So I joined AOPI as a founding member. So I thought being in Greek life was really important. All my friends from college, I think with the exception of one, are Greek. And so it was a pretty big force within like my immediate friend group. So being Greek was like really important to me. I've always loved like community service. And I kind of like the camaraderie. I came from an all-girls school, so I thought that was like really cool to have like a bunch of sisters again. And so that was really important to me, just like going into an organization, and Greek organizations, I think, have the biggest like force and presence. And then in terms of like just like sheer numbers of like people who could support you, like alumni connections and networking, that was really important to me too. So kind of like leveraging my Gettysburg network and beyond. So those are just some of the reasons why I joined.
I can go next. So I was in SA, as I previously mentioned, and I was the rush chair and the social chair my junior and senior year. I would say one of the reasons I joined was, so I'm the only child in the house. So living in a house with a bunch of like my closest friends definitely was like an eye-opening experience, and having to like learn how to share like almost everything, and people like walking into your room all the time. So that was definitely a new experience for sure. But also I had a mutual friend that was in my like fraternity at the time that we knew from back home. So that was really cool to like meet some of his older friends, and how much like Andeulazia was mentioning, like the networking and more so the aftermath of like being in Greek life at Gettysburg helped him like in his career.
So I guess before I go into my answer specifically, just because we all will be getting into questions at some point in time during the panel, and we can't really predict those. So I just want to make it clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of Dell Technologies or any of its subsidiaries. So just any views that I'm going to be expressing tonight are solely going to be views of my own, and represent my college experiences as an alumnus of Gettysburg College, and as a member of my fraternity. So we're as a member of a fraternity organization. So again, just not speaking on behalf of my employer. But that being said, my reasoning for joining Lambda Chi in Gettysburg was really looking for, again, that camaraderie. And I think we can all be pretty honest that Gettysburg is a pretty small town. There isn't a whole lot to do there. I came to campus without a car. So, I wanted to go out. I wanted to be able to meet people. I wanted to be able to have fun. That was my first time away from home. And at the same point in time, even though I wanted to have fun, I was also looking for a group of, good guys to have fun with. that, I felt would, I could be comfortable around, and and it reflected some of the values that I had. So I ended up meeting some guys from Lambda Chi. Um, it helped that one of my friends, and one of my freshman friends that I ended up connecting with, his brother was actually a brother already. So I got to get shown around the house as a freshman, and meet some guys that I thought were pretty cool. So that's what brought me in and why I initially rushed there. It's one of two places I consider rushing. And after a certain point in time, I essentially knew I was going to put my bid in it. So.
So with historically Black Greek letter organizations and multicultural Greek letter organizations, what made you choose your affiliation?
So at the time that I was at Gettysburg College, there were no historically Black fraternities and sororities. In fact, my wife was one of the founding members of Sigma Gamma Rho on campus. So that was the first historically Black organization that had been on Gettysburg campus at that point in time. So for me, there really wasn't a choice between, hey, do I have an opportunity even to join a historically Black fraternity on campus, because it wasn't there. And I guess I didn't have the adventurous side that my wife did, where she went out and she kind of forged the frontier. But that being said, for me, it was about, again, finding a group of guys that I felt I could fall in with, that I thought represented some of the same values I had. My big brother was my TA for logic in the philosophy department, so I guess I'm a philosophy guy. So that being said, I found a group that I could fall in with, and just seemed like to mesh at that point.
Do the other two have anything else to add to that?
Sure. I mean, so there was, when I graduated all 3 years ago, there was, I think, just Zeta Phi Beta on campus, which was a smaller organization. So a lot for me, my family, the women were either deltas or AKAs, nothing in between. And so instead of, I guess, going to Zeta Phi Beta, I chose to just go with an organization that I think at that time had a little bit more better representation on campus. So that was kind of my reasoning.
Yeah, kind of co-signing what Justin was saying. There wasn't any offered at the time I was there, and I graduated in 2020, so 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago. So that was kind of like my reasoning. But like I said, a lot of like my friends were like already rushing between like SA or like ATO or like Lambda or like PDT. So, and I knew a lot of like the football kids that were like rushing. And like I said, we had a mutual friend. So it was kind of like not an easy choice, but it was like very like decided like how to like just go about like that process.
So in your current, the affiliation that what you're affiliated with, and sorry, I am not a Greek member. I don't know anything about sororities or fraternities. But what is your current affiliation with your respective organizations, and how has being a member impact your life post grad?
I'll go first because I think it's been kind of active for me. So I took some time off after graduating Gettysburg, and so I just got accepted to med school. And so when I threw out the application process, there was a girl in my sorority. She was actually she rushed the year after I left, but I was her PLA for her first year seminar. And so we connected about like our application, and just like there's just kind of like that extra added support and connection that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so right now I'd probably say not the most active alumni. I still like the Instagram post, but I don't really serve in any formal roles. But I still think of them often. And I think being a member post-grad, there's scholarship opportunities, there's opportunities to do stuff with the organization post-grad, and which I really look forward to like taking advantage of as I like continue through my career. And I'm really excited about too.
So I'm kind of like in between, like too old, too young. So similar to like Andeulazia, I'm gonna be studying for like the CFA exam. So I'm like giving a lot of like the younger guys like tips on like what exam they should take if they want to go into like finance or business, or kind of like explaining like, look, if you want to take some time off from school and like go to like the workforce, that's an option. Or if you just want to go continue with school and then work after. So similar to like Andeulazia, not really a formal role, but more so the younger guys that like I knew that, wow, it's weird. Like they were freshmen when I was a senior, like now in like the same like organization that I still have relationships with. I kind of just explained to them like what I do like on a day-to-day in work, and kind of like the career path that you have with your respective major.
So I've gone in, I guess I should say, waves. And what I mean by that is, so again, came out in 2007, got married in 2009, and definitely had brothers at my wedding. It was great to, see some guys I hadn't seen in a bit. Every now and then I would come back up and visit the house because, it was a place that, still does hold a very fond place in my heart, in terms of, my memories for Gettysburg. And, heck, I lived there for 3 years. So, that's, a coming home within a coming home when you come back to campus. But, that being said, when I got out into the workforce in 2007, I hooked up with some of the alumni in the DC metro area, because that's where I was living at the time. And, we tried to get some things going, a newsletter, so on and so forth, and to do some things like that. And we were able to do a couple things, a couple networking events. I never did anything like being a ELC, educational leadership consultant, or anything like that after undergrad. But that was essentially the extent of it. I will say that, in talking about just kind of the cultural aspect, what I've noticed is, a lot of historically Black fraternity and sorority organizations, there is an afterlife, and I mean that after undergrad, with meetings and events and things that you participate in almost as if you're still active, essentially. And at least with my experience, I can't speak for anybody else. But for my experience has been that, that really isn't so much with, the organizations that aren't historically Black organizations. There really isn't that afterlife, unless you do, things like being at ELC, or, going into nationals and so on and so on and so forth. So, apart from, seeing brothers every now and then, maybe get a random Facebook message every now and then, one of the guys I keep up with on Facebook, he's a boxer, so it's nice to be like, hey, dude, I do martial arts, show me some combos. Stuff like that is good, but other than that, beyond the actual, networking and some of the stuff we try to do in the North Virginia, DC area, there really hasn't been a whole lot.
And it looks like we have one other panelist who has joined us. So I'm going to let you unmute yourself and introduce yourself. And if you could just tell us a little bit what class year you are, what organization you are part of, and if you're still active in your organization.
Hi, everyone. I'm Varsha Russell. I graduated in 2006. I am an Alpha Delta Pi. I was initiated in 2003. I am still active. We have alumni association, so we're pretty active. I haven't been as active since I've had a child, but there's always events, and we are very involved in our philanthropy, which is the Ronald McDonald House. And I apologize for being late.
For kids.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. What advice would you give to our students who are interested in joining a fraternity or sorority, and particularly our students of color? What advice would you give them?
Definitely make sure you go into it for the right reasons. I had looked at some other sororities too, and ultimately, I mean, as much as it sounds like, go where you are going to be able to make friends or have friends. Being at Gettysburg, being Black, Hispanic, being an underrepresented minority is going to be tough, right? And so Greek life, you don't want that to add to that experience. You want it to enhance it. So go to an organization where you say, okay, if I'm here and doing a ton of required events, community service, where you're going to have fun with the people that you're doing it with, above all.
I would agree with that. I would also say do your research, ask your questions. When I pledged, I was worried about being one of the few minorities in my class. And I went and asked questions. I went and saw what their policies were. And make sure that if you feel uncomfortable, you say something. Don't wait until the end. If your sisters or your brothers are really there for you, they're gonna hear what you have to say. And they'll support you and figure out ways to help make you feel more comfortable.
So I don't want to echo everything that everyone else has already said, but I'm going to echo everything that everyone else has already said. But what I would say is, to thine own self be true. At the end of the day, like Varsha said, make sure you ask questions. Make sure you are comfortable where you're going to be at. These are people that you're going to be forging, lifelong relationships with and bonds with. And to that extent, it's often said in business situations or, things of that nature, oh, would I want to have a beer with this guy? Do I want to go out? Do I want to spend time hanging out with this person? Make sure that's the type of person that you feel comfortable hanging out with, that you feel comfortable being vulnerable with even. This is a living situation. And especially if you're a guy living in a house, this is a living situation. You're gonna have roommates that, you're gonna be roommates with these guys. You're gonna share showers, you're gonna share, meals together. This is, a long-term partnership that you're entering into. And so just make sure that you're really comfortable with that. Like I said, I was fortunate to find a group that, I felt comfortable with, that, there were guys that, I did want to spend time with, guys that I felt, I could spend time with as well, that wanted to spend time with me. I was a, black metalhead. So it's like, literally I could go in and the guys were like, oh, you like Static X, you like Korn, you like, Motor Grid or whatever. And so I could just listen to metal and talk to a couple of guys about that. There's another guy that I joined. I was in Taekwondo. I have a black belt in Taekwondo. Right now I'm doing Krav Maga. I'm still do martial arts. Well, there's a guy there that was a black belt that he and I started talking about martial arts when we first started joining. And so like during that entire process of for Lambda Chi rushing and then becoming an associate member, being an AM, it was important to forge those relationships on that level because I knew that I was comfortable and I could, so and so, I could be myself. I could let my hair down and, just be aware of that. Also be aware that, you could be, I'm not going to presume that you are, but you could be coming from different cultural backgrounds. And to the extent that you are potentially coming from different cultural backgrounds, be willing to let people know when either you feel uncomfortable or you have a situation that, you feel that you might need to address. If anything of that nature ever happens, again, these are people that are supposed to be your brothers or your sisters. It's very important to, be able to have those conversations or relationships because, that's what, hopefully you're supposed to be family to an extent. That's what family's there for. So, I guess that's what my advice would be.
I would say definitely be an active listener. And then similar to like what Justin said is once you're like in, definitely get to form like a more closer relationship and like listen to like what other people are coming from, because you're already going to be like an underrepresented minority like on campus. So when you're in like or a part of Greek life for that matter, everyone's going to like know who you are for that matter. So being underrepresented and then making a mistake, only improvise it like twice. So I would definitely say go into like make an example, and then like everyone else was saying, ask as many questions as possible and don't do anything like you're not like uncomfortable with, or you would be like embarrassed, like come home and be like, oh mom, dad, like I effed up, like this happened. Like definitely know like where your values are and like keep those with you like wherever like you go in like the long run and just like in life in general.
That's good advice for everybody. Now I'm going to open it up to the audience. If you want to put your questions in the chat, or if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask our panelists, we can do it that way.
I will ask a question. Andeulazia, as one of the chartering members of your organization, how do you feel about being a part of history?
Well, it was different. I think when I was in it, I didn't feel like it, right? Like we were just struggling to set up policies, struggling to get mixers, like just, kind of going through the motions. I definitely say I feel like I had a lot more impact because I kind of set I was a treasurer, so I got to set the budgets. I got to see what it was like to sit on an executive council. And I had like a lot of executive, I think, decisions that I was in charge of that I think I wouldn't have had the chance to make if I were in maybe a more established organization. So it was cool. But then I think there was a lot of weight there because I remember when I was in my executive council, I think there was maybe one other person of color or something like that. So a lot of questions that maybe shouldn't have been asked to me were directed towards me. But it was nice that I was able to at least be in that position. And if I didn't have the answer, I could hopefully direct them towards resources that could give that answer.
Thank you.
So we have a question from the chat. For those who aren't underrepresented on campus, how can we make Greek life feel like a more comfortable and accepting place?
I think that one of the things you need to do is just listen, and do your own research as well. Ask the questions, right? If you have sisters or brothers that are in the underrepresented, they're willing to share with you their experiences. Share your experiences, even if it's times you've been uncomfortable. Talk to them and see what things you guys have in common, and don't make everything about race or culture. And that's one of the ways to really make it expansive. I remember when I accepted my bid, we had an Asian senior, and she came and ran up to me and was like, "Welcome, thanks for being the other person of color. We were excited to start," and it just started from there. And we didn't have to share the same culture, but we shared that we were different, but none of our sisters ever treated us different. And so Monique can speak to, I was with my sisters, right? I was sister, and I would flip-flop between the cultures and make it work.
I guess one thing I would say, and it's kind of dovetails off of what Varsha was saying, is so going back a little bit to what I mentioned in terms of approaching things with, when you're coming from different cultural backgrounds. So while you may have questions and while you may be learning, and everyone, God willing, we're moving through life, we're all learning at some point, and we continue to learn. But don't feel like you have the ability or it's the other person's obligation to speak for their group. And so what I mean by that is, I'm always down for having a discussion with someone that is genuinely trying to learn and genuinely has a question and approaches it in the proper manner. But I can't speak for all Black people and I can't speak for all Jewish people. Not possible. And beyond that, also approaching a person in a manner in which you are expecting that they owe you an answer for why they may have certain beliefs or practices or whatever it may be, can come off in a negative way. So just be conscious of it. I know this may be difficult for people, but being conscious about the way in which you do learn, I think is an appropriate thing. And I think that where it always goes is, sometimes also approaching it with a little bit more of knowledge, like, as opposed to so and so told me, maybe do a little bit of research first before you approach sometimes, also goes a long way towards making it a more amicable discussion if there's something you're genuinely trying to learn about. Hopefully I'm saying that in the right way, but I think I'm getting the point across.
The next question from the chat is, did you feel like you were under a microscope for being a minority in your fraternity or sorority?
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, I mean, you can't bring up a diversity policy without it being scrutinized and, well, what about this? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it kind of, I don't think it's necessarily unique to organizations. I think that's sort of the environment, unfortunately, that gets created when you are one of few in a lot of environments. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember just double thinking or, double checking anything that I would do or say, because I wanted it to be perceived how I wanted it to be perceived. And there was always, even if it wasn't necessarily said by my peers, it was something that I also internalized. So, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Andeulazia said. I mean, so for me, it was a little bit different just coming into like the environment of Gettysburg, because I went to like a boarding school and the demographic was very similar, where it's a PWI and there's like very few like people of color, like minorities. So I didn't feel like I was under a microscope per se, but I definitely know like the internal feeling of like always like having someone being watched, and like what you're doing will definitely get spoke about way more than like if someone in your class did or someone in like your like fraternity or sorority did it. So I can like relate to like the internal feeling of it, but externally you just like go about your day, like you're just so busy with like so much things, like you don't really think about it until like the unfortunate situation happens, so to speak. So I guess the like advice is to like definitely like proceed or like move with like caution, but at the same time like don't let like who you are like prevent you from like going out and like making like hard mistakes or like learning from like those mistakes.
Any other questions?
Not to gender the conversation, but Greek life is inherently binary. Do you think that the experience of being a Black woman versus a Black man in a Greek organization was different, given mixers and hookup culture? Do you think that it was different for each?
So Just speaking to my experience, I can't speak to a hookup culture. I got married shortly after college, and even before then, I always had a serious girlfriend. So can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is like in terms of mixers. So at the time, Sigma Gamma Rho was on campus. It was the only Black Greek organization that was on campus at that time. We had mixers with them. So, you know, that was fine. And so in terms of, you know, those two aspects of it, I can't really speak to anything, but, you know, those being positive interactions in terms of the fact that we mixed with Sigma Gamma Rho, and, you know, that was it.
Okay, I'll go. So I think there's definitely a difference. I mean, I felt a difference, right? But I didn't have it from, any other perspective than my own as a Black woman. But I definitely felt like there was a certain level, I think, of hyper fetishization of the Black men on campus, whether or not they were in football or SA or ATO, or whether or not they played sports. It just wasn't necessarily afforded to Black women, right? Like we never got to be just cool for being Black girls, right? Like we always had to be associated with a sorority or I don't know, had to be, I'm trying to think of the Black girls that are my group. We're on a sports team. And so as someone who was a Greek, but not in sports and did, Center for Public Service, I definitely saw a difference, right? Who was getting taken to formals, who was active in hookup culture, who was getting chosen on the mixer dance floor at 2 a.m. So I definitely felt like there was a really strong difference. And I kind of, once I got out of Gettysburg, of course, I was reminded that was, environment specific. But I definitely, I felt like there was definitely a difference in experiences, to say.
I would agree. There was definitely a difference being a Black woman. And then I'm not a thin Black woman. So there is also body type, right? I look like the average Black woman with curves and all of that. And that was a struggle for me. I know that there were certain fraternities that didn't have my sorority, and every other sorority was there, but the other women of color were more slender, petite build too. So I don't know if it was just that, but I do know that I didn't participate in the hookup culture, and it was very difficult on Gettysburg as a whole, but definitely with dating and mixers. It was definitely, as a Black woman, you were very much not desirable, or you were made to feel undesirable as you were.
Yeah, my experience was very similar to Andeulazia, because we went to school at the same time period. So it was usually Greek life and something else. So that's kind of how you got to know more and more people outside and kind of learn so to speak, this tea on campus, so to speak. But so so for me, for example, I was on a sports team and I was on Greek life, and I also worked, which is a common thing on Gettysburg, you're always involved in at least one or two things. So I would say for my experience, it was definitely, I did notice there was a difference though, because people were more likely to say hello because they would see me working at the gym or giving me a piece of equipment versus someone else who wasn't of my gender race, so to speak.
And I think to go back to the question about how to be a better ally, essentially, for peers that are of color in Greek organizations and predominantly white Greek organizations. And I just want to go back to the Myra T. Herron letter, how the organization Phi Mu was very intentional about saying, this is our stance. We would like for her to be a member. And because the national organization did not agree, the local organization said, then we don't want to be in existence. And I think for students in 1960, 465, that was huge. That was huge, gargantuan. And I think that when we think about diversity and inclusion on the College of Gettysburg campus, we think of it in the last 5, 10 to 15 years. But there were these small nuggets and diamonds of excellence that occurred at moments like that we don't know about. And I'm grateful to the alum that wrote that letter to Janet to say, I remember Myra and I remember how we wanted her. And so as you all become deeper into your Greek organizations and aligning with the missions and visions and philanthropy of your organization, I want you all to keep Myra in mind. And how every day are you supporting your peers inside of your organization and outside as well, not exclusively to your sister or your brother, but institutionally, how are you kind of pushing forward that ideal of brotherhood and sisterhood beyond the boundaries of being Greek? And so that's why I'm glad that we were able to find that letter and share it with you this evening, because I think it is a tool and an understanding that should be a part of the lexicon and the dynamic as you go into the rush process and you're thinking about how can we be more inclusive, how we can create an environment of belonging and not just diversity, right? Not just trying to get the numbers of Black and Brown people, but actually creating an environment of belonging. So I really want to thank the alumni that are joining us this evening, but thank you all as students to being open and perceptive to this conversation that I think is long overdue. And hopefully we can continue to partner and build on this conversation with the alum here and other alums that identify as Greek as well. But I do want to stop talking and allow any closing thoughts or opportunities from the alumni that are joining us this evening.
So I guess just in closing, I give a lawyer a soapbox, he's going to take it. So I guess in closing, what I'll say is this. It's a great initiative to have and a great discussion to have in terms of, I don't want to just say diversity, but inclusiveness within the Greek system. And so, this is a great start to the process. Obviously, like Monique said, there have been, diamonds and gold nuggets and things have happened over the past. And not every experience has been, unfortunately, there have been negative experiences. So just in terms of keeping that discussion going, in terms of when you go back to your houses, or if you're considering, rushing when you go back, just making sure that you look to the people beside you and you hold people accountable. You are open to learning. You're open to evaluating yourself, and also having those educational conversations from a proper perspective. And I want to again emphasize the proper perspective in terms of how you approach people and how you have those discussions. But that being said, I think this is a wonderful initiative, and I hope that it continues to grow and that the organizations on campus as a entity continue to move towards inclusivity for everyone.
Varsha?
I just want to say thank you for hosting this. I wish I had had it when I was an undergrad. I really felt lost in the process and didn't even know where to start with asking questions and things like that. So I think having different organizations, different people represented that can speak a little to each of our own personal experiences is a great start. And I hope that, like Justin said, we continue this conversation, and the organizations are able to reach out to their alum and make sure that everyone feels welcome, whether they decide to belong or not.
Andeulazia?
Thank you for Monique for the invitation, and then thank you guys for taking the first step. And so, I mean, good luck, right? I know when I was at Gettysburg, I didn't have, I mean, really the wealth of resources that have been like that Monique has provided, or that even the institution as a whole has really like worked to provide. So, I mean, take advantage of them. A lot of that work, unfortunately, has to be done by you as an individual, but you know, you're not alone. So.
Thanks, Monique and Amanda, for hosting and inviting me. My one bit of advice or like closing would be definitely to, like I said, you know, just keep asking as many questions as possible. And, you know, I really want to like emphasize like what Monique said about like the relationship aspect of it. Like it's one thing to just like hit a number, but like look to your left, look to your right, and like see who like these are the people you want to like bring home to like meet your parents or like hang out after grad. Because to be honest, like there's some kids that won't like make it with you like all 4 years. Like they'll get in and then next semester they're gone. So I definitely want to like remind you, like keep that in perspective and remember like you're there for school, because it happened to me once, one semester, and I definitely learned a lesson the hard way. But it is a reality though, like some kids really just don't finish, or they just focus on the wrong thing. So definitely like want to emphasize that point as like you go throughout like this process. And similar to like Andeulazia and like the other panelists said, like I didn't have this, or it was in the works when I was leaving, and my time was like cut too short. So definitely like make the most of it, and whatever like you decide, just hopefully like you can like live with it like 5 years down the line.
Thank you. You all have a good evening, and thank you again to the students for joining us. Have a good night.